Watching this evening. Thank you, Richard Okenye, for the sports updates. And now we want to get into the main conversation tonight. And first, allow me to acknowledge and appreciate the guests in studio. And we're looking at 2 steps forward. Is it 2 steps forward or backward? To what direction? I think that's where the question is. We saw the protests that happened for a number of weeks in this country, lives lost, destruction of property witnessed. The president came out to speak on Friday in a very specific State of the Nation address, gave out some very key austerity measures. Kenya still came out to say, well, we really need to see more action more than the address. However, let us also take into consideration the president going on the digital platform that is X Space between 2 to 5 p.m. that very same day, where he actually interacted with the pretty tough questions from Gen Z and Kenyans on Twitter. We're doing a follow-up here this evening on the austerity measures. Are they working? Are they proper? Remember, the president spoke on a task force to, of course, audit the debt, but we saw the president of the LSK, Faith Odhiambo, withdraw from it, saying, no, thank you. Now, fast forward into the, the court's position, saying this particular task force in itself is unconstitutional, hence suspended. Now, we'll be looking and interrogating further one by one with the intelligent voices right here with me this evening. Let me start by bringing out their photos to you, and if they're familiar as well, comment at KTN News. And we have there Alex Mwathi, who is a political analyst, Suba Churchill, the Executive Director, Kenya National Civil Society Center, and Eric Okeyo, security expert, political analyst, and Abraham Kira, who's the Member of Parliament, Musop, and will be joining us, of course, later. Gentlemen, it's very good to have you. And we want to hear your voice and your thoughts. But before you even give us your thoughts, let me bring in some of our front pages as the news has been developing, starting from Sunday. Now, if you look at the Sunday Standard, this is what they wrote. Grounded president. Remember, this is just after the address. And it is interesting to look at the front page, just to look back a bit and into today's paper. But on the Sunday Standard, grounded president, busy at home. They're saying in his first year in office, President Ruto was seemingly on a shuttle diplomacy, visiting 38 countries in what he said were engagements that would help drive the economy and make Kenyans' lives better. This was amid fury over the course of the presidential travels. Now, in the last 3 weeks, he has barely moved out of Nairobi, handling protests and political fires in his Kenya Kwanza camp. You may disagree or agree, but let's fast forward to today's papers from page quickly. To fire or to keep. Remember, a number of critics coming out on what the president said. To fire or keep, Ruto's cabinet dilemma is the front page of today's paper. And President William Ruto faces probably the biggest test of his presidency on who to fire from the cabinet. Will he fire? Let me hear from you, gentlemen, in a number of things that are coming on the table, your general remarks. Suba Churchill, what do you make of the current affairs development into this evening?
Thank you very much. First of all, before I even answer the questions that you have raised, we must, first of all, try to understand the context.
Yes.
The period leading to what we are now experiencing, first of all, started with the shooting of a magistrate at the Makadara Law Courts. Then we had, the demonstration setting in, running for 3 good weeks. And even after the president, said that he would not sign the finance bill 2024, the public still did not, get satisfied with that. And part of the reason is because increasingly, we are witnessing a situation of the crisis of confidence, lack of confidence and trust in our institutions and individual leaders. We also witnessed, for example, after the attack of the magistrate who later on unfortunately died, we saw, institutions, court buildings, both in Eldoret and Nairobi, invaded by protesters, and that for me was significant, because it means that there are people in this country, citizens of this country, that have an issue. But more importantly, we saw Parliament for the first time in our history overrun by protesters after very spirited efforts and attempts by the security agents to keep them at bay. And so we are facing a deficit trust in our leadership, and all arms of government seem to have an issue in terms of enjoying the trust and confidence of the public. Back to your question, I think the president, in my view, is grappling to regain control. When you saw him even, pleading with the Gen Zs that, I'm ready to meet you in your space, I saw, in my view, a head of state that is struggling to regain control, or to be in charge of things that he somehow lost control of. And it is good that, the Gen Zs gave him audience.
Okay.
Of course, he was asked very tough questions. And those questions should send a very powerful message, in my view, to government and to the president, that Kenyans that he leads today, the Kenyans that President Ruto leads today, are completely different from the Kenyans that President Uhuru led a few years ago, completely different from the Kenyans that Kibaki led a few years ago. But unfortunately, it seems that the current president is still using the playbook that was used when Kenya attained independence, of containing, dissent.
Okay.
Today's generation is very bold, and I must congratulate the Gen Zs for taking up their place in the national discourse of this country and announcing in the most bold manner that has ever been seen in this country that they are here to determine their own destiny and to be part of the conversation, because our own president has a habit of inviting people to the conversation. Now the people he keeps on inviting to the conversation have come and said, here we are, and we'll do it in our own way.
All right.
On X and so on and such platforms, and the president has to engage. So that for me is very critical. Remember, the military is out of the barracks, not because they are battling a foreign army, but because the civilian authority appears to have lost the legitimacy, to govern, and has to be propped up by the military in order to stabilize. And that for me is very, very significant.
All right, quite a way to start. Eric, okay, when we last spoke, I think the president was yet to address the nation. And one of the recommendations you gave on live television to the president is that he just goes out there and dissolve the parliament, if I got that correctly. But that's not one of the things the president mentioned, as you had expected.
Thank you, Anne, for having me again. Let me start from the headlines, and then I pick that question. The headline of yesterday, the grounded president.
Right.
I don't think that William Ruto has been in this country for a record 3 weeks since he was elected. He has been an airborne president, I suspect, changing airborne, landing and going. We must thank Gen Zs. I associate with them most strongly that they have brought order. Now we have a president grounded that he cannot even, I don't even think he can now go to the UK for the swearing in of the new prime minister because at home, he has enough fire to put out.
You don't think we have settled this fire so far?
No. And then when you look at the headline of today, which is to fire or not to fire.
To fire or to keep.
To fire or to keep. When you go to Holy Family Basilica yesterday, and I was in All Saints Cathedral, we had an interdenominational service by all the faith-based leaders, Hindu Council, the Muslim faith, the Kenya Conference, the National Council of Churches of Kenya, and the Evangelical Alliance. And if you saw the comprehensive statement that they released moments after service, they asked the president to dissolve cabinet, have a moment where Kenyans now nominate to him names of people they have faith in. That was the first one, because I was in charge. So Canon Chris Kinyanjui, the General Secretary of NCCK, read it. And when you go on X, on social media, you see the way Gen Zs are also putting up enough pressure. So then you say, you don't even know tomorrow it will be which one. And you have the president where he sits now mourning the finance bill. This is the same fellow who said the finance bill was the best prescription for us in the circumstances. And his own Prime Cabinet Secretary, Musalia Mudavadi, said a rejection of a finance bill is a rejection of government. He's quoted as saying that. That's public. You're not going to say that it's hearsay. Just allow me.
All right.
Just allow me. So then these young guys come with their handkerchiefs and smartphones and demonstrate and find themselves in parliament. The meaning of that is simple. That confidence in that house ended, died, was buried that day. Then the president, the next day, I think a few days later, said in State House that he is declining to sign the bill, having listened overwhelmingly to the voice of Kenyans.
Yes.
That's what he said. And the people who voted for it now clapping that he has now listened. Clapping heavily behind him. But if you listen to him on this X space, he is now mourning the death of the finance bill.
I wanted to interject on the morning of the finance bill.
Yes.
Even as he mourned the finance bill, because I'll come to Mwathi shortly,
Yes.
the president was also clear on the effects of withdrawing the finance bill. He talked on key areas that will be affected. He talked about a budget, cut that was already proposed to the National Assembly. Don't you think the president is aware, as he's mourning, that he also came with the other ways, in fact, of borrowing some money to deal with certain key areas? You keep emphasizing on him mourning.
Correct.
And not looking at him giving alternatives to what has to be done.
The problem is now you have a president whose word no one wants to take to any bank. And that's why you see the Gen Zs are saying, we don't want to talk, act fast. If I were him, by today, as we sit here, there would be no cabinet.
Totally.
Yes.
So you're not convinced about the 47 operations that are to be dissolved? You
know, and I've been in that public space. I have run parastatals. I've been a chair of government institutions.
All right.
And I will tell you this. Parastatals and semi-autonomous government agencies, they're also called SAGAs, they work and are supervised by cabinet secretaries. There are nearly 400 in this country, if you didn't know, and nearly 400, plus or minus. He has picked a paltry 10%. The question is, what was the yardstick of picking this 10%? Many of them are struggling to be in space. Many of them cannot meet their pending bills. So he has picked 10%, but their parents remain, cabinet secretaries remain. People are still on the road going to offices as cabinet secretaries, principal secretaries. So for me, and that's why I agree with the lack of trust for him. No one wants to believe his word, because today, and I said this when you hosted me here the other time, I do not want to imagine how Moses Wetangula will come back and pray in parliament and say it's a house of welfare. So him and the president by now ought to have agreed that parliament is dissolved and the president equally dissolves government.
All right.
Then he begins reconstructing it.
Alex, what are your sentiments really? Because I want to bring up a cartoon here as well, and the Gen Z platform on X. But what would be your remarks?
Number one, first of all, let me say hello to the viewers.
Right.
It's really a pleasure to be here this evening.
Karibu.
Really appreciate one of the people that this station sees as worthy to come and talk about these matters that concerns this nation of ours, this beautiful country of ours. Grounded president, really grounded in the real sense of the word. Just to put numbers for your viewers, in 2022, after being elected and sworn in as president, was it September, October? In 3 months, he did 10 foreign trips. In 2023, he did 34 foreign trips. In 2024, January to May, he had done 19. Meaning that he did 3 trips every single month since he was sworn in as president. So really he's grounded. And I don't see him getting out of this country for the next 2-3 months.
Why so?
Governments, people remember somebody called Milton Obote.
Yes.
People remember Milton Obote. And you'll not be smart and wise not to look at history and use it as a basis for looking at your future. So grounded, yes, in terms of that.
Okay.
Number 2 is I get a feeling that him and the people around him are not getting it. And the way they're not getting it is the clamor for finance bill was a trigger to something that was already burning. To an extent, people had a discontent with things. We came from a Jubilee government, which he was the deputy president, that people are very extremely unhappy with. But somehow in the campaign, and I've said many times, campaign is about mass seduction. And seduction is about lying and telling people that things that you're going to do for them, that sometimes you don't necessarily do them. So that when you seduce one, comes home, you forget all that we talked about, let's now start living together. The KK campaign was about changing a narrative, dealing with the issues that Kenyans had at the grassroots level. And that's why President Ruto went to Muranga 950 times to campaign. 950 times. Meaning he was so close to the ground that he could feel it more than even the members of parliament and other people who were there. I think he must have made more trips than even the members of parliament did to their constituencies. Including he's remembered for buying bananas, so I think a bunch of banana for 20,000 shillings at one stage in some village in Muranga.
Okay.
And people listened to him, listened to them, and they promised heaven. They promised the Canaan that we talked about for many years, that we are going to cross now and get into Canaan with my government. And that was the basis by which everybody turned to him and turned away from the so-called dynasty, so-called old form of things, because human beings forget very quickly, and they focused on him. As soon as they land into government, they forgot every single promise.
No.
And started doing their own things. To an extent, started vomiting on our shoes. And you remember in the X space, he was asked about people like Karen Nyamo, he was asked about people like Ichung'wah, and he said, I've called them and I've spoken to them. And he's not getting it, because yesterday or day before yesterday, Molkomen was it again, telling us that we need to do what you call this audit, and you should now start telling me the watch that you're going to wear. I think he loses it, because you are a minister, you are a CS in the government of Kenya. We know your salary. How can you be able to wear 4 million shillings worth of watch? Meaning that the pride that was there is still there. Now, this is the one that really riled everyone. And the Gen Zs have seen that, and they are completely unhappy with it.
Now, Alex, I want to fast forward because, you know, it looks like you are not convinced that what the president talked about on Friday, gentlemen, is convincing enough to, you know, move forward. You know, from what I'm hearing, none of you is saying the decision to fill the positions of the chief administrative secretaries is suspended is a good move. None of you is saying the number of advisors in government to be reduced by 50% within the public service with immediate effect is a positive thing. You are not talking about these things that the president spoke about as austerity measures, the removing of the budget to the, you know, offices of the spouses, Churchill. This did not show any significance at all, as long as much as some legal officials are saying, he does not have the mandate legally and constitutionally to afford some of this.
Some of us who have lived in this country for long enough know, for example, that there was some recruitment by the Kenya Revenue Authority. Recruitment that was lopsided, was criticized all over the place. People went to court. The court nullified the appointments of those officers. They are on the job. We know. Have you seen the job positions advertised? No. So when we say there is lack of trust, the Gen Zs know, are unaware. They know their own friends who are still working under KRA, whose appointment were pronounced as illegal and procedural, and who are still on the job. That is the government we have in power. When the president says he will abolish the votes for office of the First Lady, Second Lady, and so on, people want to see action. What people are waiting for, what else is the president waiting for that stops him from reducing his cabinet, for example?
Is it necessary?
Yeah?
You feel that that is the first action? It is necessary?
I mean,
that's
one of the grievances that Kenyans put on the table.
Okay.
And he himself has pronounced himself on it.
He said he will work on it shortly.
No, I mean, shortly, you know, I have been in the civil society. And for 13 good years, since 2013, 11 good years, there is this law, NGO law called Public Benefit Organizations Act, that the government promised us for 11 years. It will be operationalized shortly. So we understand. We have a history with terminologies like shortly, soon, and so on and so forth. The president is not keen to budge. He's playing tough. And my worry is that as we continue to keep our military soldiers, you know, out there, as we see all these tensions, even today, we had a protest at the Ministry of Health headquarters. Does the president and his government think that those things will just disappear? That he will keep the police, I see, you know, armed to the teeth with rungus. I see civilians today, you know, protecting their businesses, today with jackets written Linda. That is how militia started in countries like Rwanda. People start like that. People dressing civilians, accompanying police to protect their businesses. The stage is being set for the formation and coming up of private militias in the name of protecting business. When ideally, those people who are protecting their business should be telling the government, it is your responsibility to ensure that our businesses are safe, because they are taxpayers. So we are in a very precarious and fluid situation, which, in my view, you know, we can, as he rightly put it, as Eric Okeyo said, we cannot tell what tomorrow will look like.
All right.
Because we still continue to hear about disappearances of people. As late as today, I was being told about, you know, bodies being discovered, bullet riddled, and so on. There are people who are still burying their own, and yet there are families whose loved ones have not been accounted for.
All right.
Weeks after, you know, they disappeared. So how come we have degenerated that fast The other day, our president was being garlanded in the United States of America by one of the most powerful leaders in this world. Kenya was honored with the respect of being, associated with
an ally
of NATO and so on. Then, within weeks, things began to unravel in a speed that our leadership seems to have been caught, literally pants down. And they seem not to have appreciated the challenge before them. And in my view, as long as the president, takes too long to act, some of the things he said by now should have been acted. We have a president who said he did not campaign on this tribe and that.
Right.
He campaigned on issues.
Right.
So he should not be beholden to ethnic loyalties and should act without any regard, because he went direct to the people, as you said. He has pointed out that he visited Murang'a County 950 times. He had a direct touch with the people. He did not get the votes from Mount Kenya, for example, through a bridge.
All right.
As now, the deputy president wants to claim. More importantly, we are discussing these issues when there is internal strife within the government itself. The deputy, playing to his own gallery, as recently as yesterday, he blamed the Ministry of Interior. Now, when all these things happen, Kenyans have a reason to worry. And there is no certainty as to what tomorrow holds for the youngest and the oldest member of this Kenyan society.
Saying there is no certainty. Now,
no certainty.
Talking about coming from, when he took over power, all the headlines across internationally said, the boy from Sugoi, the one that was in touch with hustlers, has risen to power, creating some very incredible history. But he once again went closer to the people on the X platform. In fact, gentlemen, if you look at some comments, they are saying such a humble president has gone down to the people, not seen most of the times, right? Let's give a recap of this particular story that was filed by Noah Kipkemboi on the president's conversation on the X platform.
I have the benefit of information in my hands.
The first engagement between Kenya's head of state and Kenyans on X Space, where live audio conversations are domiciled on social media platform X, did not start smoothly, with technical issues hitting the president's team.
Yeah. Invite host.
It's still muted.
In an X Space that was supposed to be hosted by President William Ruto, soon shifted to social media influencer Osama Otero, and off the discussions began, with the president's empathy and honesty being put to question.
Haunanga huruma. You are not empathetic. Nini kitu imekasisha watu wengi, Mr. President?
I think you grew up in a very authoritarian family that you expect people just to dance to your tune.
Most of the people have said is that your government is full of lies.
But the president did not hesitate to defend himself, further acknowledging that he might be different in empathy display based on his upbringing.
If you can send me the details of what happened, I will be able to take action, because you don't deserve the kind of treatment that you went through. Let me also say the following. You have talked about empathy. Maybe, people are born differently. Maybe we empathize in different ways.
Soon, the emotive issue of anti-finance bill protests, spearheaded by the Gen Z, came up, with many youths telling the president that government response was unprovoked and beyond forceful, leading to loss of lives.
We were not booked in any single police station. We were taking a certain house. I think it was a safe house or something. I was blindfolded. Some guys were blindfolded for like 12 hours. Surely, Mr. President, are we in a terrorist country?
You might say say that the police body is independent, but this is not a democracy. It is not functioning like a democracy, but a dictatorship, Mr. William Ruto.
In a typical president.
Eric, you're listening and just giving you a replay of what it is, and you have followed. And in fact, the president going down to that level, according to other people, should have been humbling enough for Kenyans to see that he is a listening president, and we need to move forward as a country, seemingly in the right direction. Eric, you're not convinced yet that he listened?
The last time you hosted me here, I remember vividly a few things that I told you. One, I told you that the finance bill was simply a tip of the iceberg. And I said here, it was like the match that was being used to light the fire. I said here that many issues will come after the finance bill. You know, when the president flies to the US and tells the outgoing US President, Joe Biden, that Haiti is a small problem that the a formation of the Kenyan police is capable of dealing with, notwithstanding the existence of a court order that says, do not. This is a president who swore to uphold the Constitution and obey its laws. And then he comes back home just a month later and realizes that these smartphones and handkerchiefs and water that the Gen Zs have used to protest can only be stopped by the military and now not the policemen that he sent to Haiti. You know?
Is it? I think the military was just to guard the critical areas, not really to deal with the protesters, Eric. Are you confusing us but a little bit? Yes.
If you have a copy of the Gazette notice, the Honorable Judge, in allowing the deployment, asked government to reissue the Gazette notice in 2 days and address itself to 3 issues. 1, scope, 2, geography, and 3, duration.
All right.
If you have seen that Gazette notice, it is saying the entire country is disturbed. All the 47 counties. Show it if you have it. So it says the entire country
until normalcy is restored.
Simply means UFN, until further notice. So when will normalcy be restored? So that's the problem. So you have a president you describe as humble, coming down to the Gen Zs, but surrounded by tankers in State House, away from the same Gen Zs. Yeah? So, and the reason I have a problem with his latest address in State House, the one of Friday, he was just becoming intelligently cunning to deal with the X-space discussion. Because, look, you do not say that the budget for the offices of the First Lady, the Second Lady, and the other one of
Office of the Prime Cabinet Secretary's House?
Yes, that one. So first, he had admitted that there are MOFAs, they are not described in the Constitution. He should have started by saying, sorry, I found this anomaly, continued with it. It has cost us money, my friend. They were reallocating, I think, nearly 800 million for them, and that they are outside the Constitution. One of them has 285 employees, another one 100, another one I don't know how many. What has happened to those employees? That's why I'm saying possible lip service ahead of the X-space engagement. When you come and talk about suspending the creation of offices that don't make sense, these CASs, even the courts didn't agree with them. It was pushed through the National Assembly. He assigned them. They are now a legitimate existence, as it were. So, suspended why? As the Gen Zs were saying, scrap. The English word used, it's very tactical, suspended, so that in a month or two, if dust settles, he returns them. You are saying that you appreciate that we are in an economic ICU of sorts. We are machines, breathing on machines. If you go to the Constitution, it describes the cabinet in two ways. That it will consist of him, his deputy, the Attorney General, and no fewer than 14 members, and no more than 22 of them. It's simple. We're in ICU. By now, he should have either brought the whole thing down or reconstituted it to the bare minimum, which is 14. Wait, that would have it would have an instant effect.
Yes.
It would have an instant effect. But you say suspended, budget reduced, budget this, lip service.
All right, Alex, I know there's a side of you that also leans into an economy. We had the motors, buying of these motors for motor vehicles for this particular statesman suspended for about 12 months. Let's just hear about that as well. You don't think this is impacting in the economy at any point? Because citizens had a problem with that, talking about some wastage kind of expenditure.
The bigger issue in life is what Einstein told us. The thinking that brought us this problem cannot be the thinking that can get us out.
Okay.
To an extent, if we are really in ICU and you are doing a business re-engineering, which is basically my forte, you don't do patch-up work. You do like a doctor does. You dissect and remove any part that is sick. To an extent, you can't postpone an operation so that hoping that the patient will be alive in a year's time. You do what is supposed to be done. Evaluate whether a cabinet minister needs 3 vehicles to move around town with 15 men and women as his security. Is he a crook? So the bottom line is, there has to be a proper forensic. And I keep hearing you talk about the X-Space and the fact that he was with the young ones and all that. Yeah, picked it from the public. I'm talking. I know you are quoting what the public is saying.
Yes.
But think for a moment. I do not know whether you listened. In the entire answering of the question that he was asked, it was I. It's the worst thing to do. Because you're assuming you're superhuman. In every answer, it's I have done that, I have done that, I have done that, I have done that. And anybody who was listening who sat back and thought, oh, just hold on. Does he run a government or it's him who runs everything? The bottom line is, if we are in a situation of financial crisis, and we are based on the amount of money that you have borrowed. Remember that we have a budget of 3.9 trillion shillings. Our revenue, it's just been announced that we did 2.4 trillion. So the projection is 2.9 trillion by the end for this year, for the coming year. Based on, I'm quoting the finance bill because whatever way we say, it's still the basis for us to think. It means that we had projected 1 trillion borrowing, even before paying any money on the debt. That's no seriousness. So it means that we need to dissect our expenditure and actually decide to cut it out. I may even have 22 CSs, but ensure that each CS spends a third of what he's spending today. And ensure that everyone have all the parastatals in place, but ensure that those parastatals do not spend and waste the amount of money that we do. Because we are Kenyans, we know how much money is wasted, including buying of flowers and all the things that are done in this country.
Do you speak for all Kenyans, saying we know?
For those Kenyans, you know we are Kenyans.
In figures.
You know we are used to that. You know we are used to that.
Facts.
Even I can give facts. Given time, I can give you a lot of facts.
Okay.
You know I have facts.
I understand
I can give a lot of them. I'm using a general term to be able to say majority know these things.
Okay.
And it's a fact of life.
Let me tell
that
you.
we'll need to dissect the expenditure that we do so that you can be able to handle what happens going forward. Now, but I want to go back to what I had said earlier. And the point is that this is not about the finance bill. This is not about Ruto.
All right.
The President Ruto. This is about the pain that Kenyans have gone through. And they are saying now, you see, and the Gen Zs are the ones who have picked it up. And if you allow me, I'll tell you that it happened in 1920s when people were fighting for land. It happened in 1950s when the Gen Zs, Kinaden and Kimathi, went to the forest fight for independence. It happened in the 80s and 90s when we got the first liberation, the so-called political liberation. And this is the third one where we are getting liberated from economic situation. So this can only be addressed by understanding that it's not a matter of giving 10 pointers that will solve the problem, because the problem will remain until there is a real change in this country.
Until there's a real change in this country.
Yes.
Now, even as Churchill just adds to what you're saying, or, disputes it, let's see, there's a cartoon now also you're bringing up on the screen. Kenyans have a different way of expressing themselves. Churchill, even as you continue to weigh in on this matters, you could also give us your comments on the cartoon coming on the screen shortly. Yes, Churchill. So he's saying we're in an ICU.
The president has admitted as much. It's not, from him. He's just reiterating what the president himself acknowledged. But until and before the Gen Zs took to the streets to give voice to what Kenyans expressed, we forget that different stakeholders appeared before the Finance and Planning Committee of the National Assembly. The chairperson kept on telling us these are just proposals until they were adopted. Mm-hmm. And you saw the anger that even in his own constituency, people expressed. Mm-hmm. And now that is the kind of arrogance that Kenyans have said, we have had enough of this.
Even as you're waiting for that cartoon on the screen.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. And today, and I agree with him, that, Kenyans never knew what a finance bill is. Today you go to the rural areas, the village women will tell you, hii tunakubali ama tuna reject. That's the language, that's the question they ask. So every Kenyan is so educated about public affairs to a point where if the president still thinks, because what I see about the president's body language and even his meeting with Gen Zs, he still thinks that he has space to wriggle himself out. He still thinks that he's smart, he still thinks that he's tough, and he will somehow wriggle his way out of this. Mm. And when you look at the cartoon, which way forward and which way backwards, and government spending still, bulging at the seams, the taxes, we have this emaciated person, they are all pulling in the opposite direction. I think this cartoon does not depict the actual picture. That whereas the taxes are diminishing, the government is still spending, and it's in my view very, very accurate, because whatever promises the president made, we asked ourselves, is proposing them to who? He knows very well that Parliament is on recess.
All right.
For you to dissolve any parastatal, including the 47 that he listed, he must table a bill before the National Assembly to that effect. The National Assembly must go through it. In any case, we have the national values and principles of governance calling for public participation. What criteria did the president use to identify the parastatals?
Okay.
That he wants, And we have been on these parastatal reforms. You remember during the time of Uhuru Kenyatta, we had a situation where, a task force was appointed, I think chaired by former MP for Mandera East or West. Yes, Abdikadir Mohammed chaired a task force. So reforming parastatals is a political issue because the president, both past and current, use parastatals to reward cronies. So, and these people are on contract. If people have been appointed chair of a board of a parastatal, they are on contract. They will go to court as soon as you tell them they have no job. This thing must be done soberly. The president must have a conversation with the people, not, put himself in State House and come up arbitrarily with, figures that Kenyans have not engaged on. We are saying that there are certain things, for example, like reducing the cabinet, that I think the president is taking a bit too long to act on. There are cabinet secretaries, like the other day I saw Aden Duale saying, If you think I've let you down, please fire me. I'll not begrudge you for relieving me of my duties. And it is in the national interest that the president does that, because if he really wants to regain control, and let me tell you, this thing of meeting Gen Zs on X and whatever, is not an act of humility. The president is an act of desperation. The president is struggling to regain control. Yes, he may be the commander of the armed forces. He got them out of the barracks. They are keeping him safe and so on. Their public facilities are protected, but no army in the world has ever protected a leadership from the masses.
Okay.
From the Philippines to, and all those places. Okay. No army has ever protected a head of state or a government
from the masses,
from its own people.
All right, gentlemen, I believe it's very, very, short time. It's a very short time that we have right now, and I want to go to Eric. But Eric, speaking of what Churchill has brought on, the IEBC is very critical. From the time Azimio was on the streets, NADCO was formed, we have a report, we have certain constituents who are yet to have another member of parliament. We are talking about recalling members of parliament. Let me just air this particular package. It's a very short package to show us where we are at with the IEBC. It's another critical issue. Are we moving forward? Are we moving backwards? And to which direction? Let's look at this. That was, of course, filed earlier on in as far as IEBC is concerned.
A day after Wiper leader Kalonzo Musyoka asked President William Ruto to promptly sign the Electoral and Boundaries Commission Amendment Bill 2024 into law to enable snap parliamentary elections, the plea could have forced the IEBC to move to the Supreme Court for further directions. IEBC CEO Hussein Marjan Hussein, in his affidavit, says that he wrote to Attorney General Justin Muturi seeking his opinion on whether the Secretariat could undertake the review of the boundaries as set by the Constitution in the absence of commissioners. According to the IEBC CEO, Muturi advised that failure to review boundaries may lead to litigations from Kenyans claiming their rights have been compromised. The AG is said to have advised the Commission that the Constitution cannot be contravened under any circumstances, meaning that the timelines cannot be extended. The Commission was required to conduct the delimitation process between 6th of March 2020 and 6th of March 2024. However, the process has not commenced since IEBC has no commissioners in office, apart from the desk work which was conducted by the Secretariat and the now retired commissioners. On 27th of February 2023, President William Ruto duly appointed 7 members to the selected panel for the recruitment of nominees for appointment as the chairperson and members of the commission. The advertisement for commissioner's position was done as well as shortlisting, but no interviews were conducted, after which President William Ruto and Azimio leader Raila Odinga agreed to form a bipartisan committee to address key issues, including reconstruction of the IEBC. The bipartisan team, led by Wiper leader Kalonzo Musyoka and National Assembly Majority Leader Kimani Ichung'wah, later embarked on a process of receiving views from Kenyans, leading to the preparation of the NADCO report. This report is now before Parliament, awaiting debate and consequent enactment of proposed bills. Until this is done, the reconstruction of the IEBC remains on hold. Vera Mura, KTN News, Nairobi.
Come on, Eric. We cannot be in a constitutional crisis at the same time be in the ICU as far as the cabinet is concerned. We need to move forward.
Thank you very much. And I notice time is running against us. I forgot 2 things. I'll deal with IEBC, but just indulge me for 2 minutes. Number 1, just to further strengthen my view on the lack of trust on the honesty of the president, you yourself mentioned something about him reducing the presidential advisors.
Yes,
first of all,
50%.
they are over 20. They are on job group U. They are remunerated like PSs. Now, why I don't trust him is by now we should have seen an instrument removing the half of them by name. because Kenyans don't even know how many there are. I am advantaged to know that they are slightly over 20 and that they are in job group U, which is PSS. They each have a vehicle, security guards, driver, etc., and office space. If it's reducing by 50%, that means 12 thereabout. Which ones are they? He should have said that. 2 is you can't be talking austerity but begin another route of unnecessary task forces every day. We cannot be a country now of task forces because people appointed to task forces draw salary and draw allowances from the exchequer. So it's ironical to talk about task forces. But let me also, before I go to IEBC, commend very, very, very boldly the LSK and its current leadership, Faith Odhiambo. She has shown that she is of her own mettle. She has shown that you cannot gazette her to an illegal task force and then go to bed with unconstitutional processes. So I want to, from here, commend Faith Odhiambo, commend the LSK Council for standing firm. I think now we have Gen Zs and LSK. And yesterday, as I was in church, I need to say this. I realized Kenyans have now created a pressure group called Kenya Bora Tuitakayo, KBT. Another one like Gen Z, but of adults and professionals, and they are saying we want to be governed in this manner, that we can now speak to how we want to be governed. So I think we're on the right track. In fact, when I listened to how they were articulating the issues, I asked to be added to a group. I'm now part of a group. And you look at them, they're engaging positively. No one is calling each other by the tribe. No one is calling each other by a second name. They call each other comrade, 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 but they want to be listened. I think we're on the right track. Coming to IEBC, there's no situation that has no remedy.
Okay.
We can't be in this lacuna until kingdom in heaven come on earth.
But we need to work with the timeline.
So I want to be of this view that we wait and see the signing of the bill tomorrow, because I'll tell you, last week the High Court sitting in Kisii gave some directions to IEBC, because the CEO of IEBC filed an affidavit and he was saying he cannot gazette a returning officer to go to Kisii in the absence of the chair of the commission. But the chair of the commission is merely the presidential returning officer. They are returning officers, and that's why what the judge said, the judge in Kisii, I read that ruling, she said, you have 14 days to bring a county returning officer to gazette the deputy governor.
Because of time, yes.
In the absence of which, on the 15th day, he will stand gazetted and will proceed to be sworn in. So I think from where we are now, if the IEBC can be signed, as I've seen a notice that the president intends to sign it tomorrow, I think I would have no problem with that, so that it can help us to move forward.
All right. Because of time, I think we only have 2 minutes. But Alex, hearing that the court's position on the, the debt audit team itself is declared, unconstitutional or for whatever reason suspended, do you feel the president is not legally advised properly before he made these remarks? Because Kenyans are asking, why would the president make these remarks and have the courts declare differently on the same?
My understanding of the court ruling was not that they did not declare it illegal.
No, it's not illegal.
They suspended it so that they can hear. And that's what the court does every time, because they can't take a position.
Is this how it should be in the country?
That's the way it's supposed to be, because if I go to court to complain about him, the court can't decide that he's wrong.
Right.
The court says, because what happens that if that task force starts working and the court determines that it was not constitutional at the end of hearing, then it means that that ruling is useless, as it were. So they suspend. Yes. That's why they give you a bail if you are charged in court. They give you a bail so that you can be able to stand, and once you've proven that you are guilty, then they're able to do the sentence. If you remember, if the police hold you or you are jailed and then you go to court and the court determines against you, that time you served is added as part of that. So the court did not determine that that is unconstitutional.
Right.
They said suspend it so that we can hear and be able to determine.
All right.
Now, they could determine one way or the other. But the bottom line is, I had said earlier that the whole issue of I is for me concerning, because it's like it's me who decides everything, and you know, except for me, there's nothing else that can be done. We're in a crisis because of this IEBC. I hear these NADCO and all that bills and all that, but this is a separate issue. And if you remember, even during some court cases, there was a whole issue as whether three commissioners form a quorum to be able to run IEBC. There was an issue of whether three forms a quorum. The bottom line is the office cannot run without the board. And the commissioners are necessary for anything to be done, including the demarcation of land. Because that's in the Constitution. It's not something that a court in Kisii can determine. If the government, the Attorney General, picks it up and takes it to the High Court, that ruling will be thrown out.
All right, gentlemen, all this on the table. Churchill, generally, now, your closing remarks.
My closing remark is that as one who participated in writing the Constitution,
yes,
in 2003, 2004, at the Bomas Constitutional Conference, we established, and they are there in the Constitution, commissions and independent officers. And the reason we established those was to ward off this tendency by governments to establish task forces. Some of the task forces, and it is interesting that Kenyans have no appetite for them, including the National Multi-Sectoral Forum. There is no Kenyan has an appetite to be part of that. And the president seems to have gotten the message. No Kenyan has an appetite to be part of the forensic audit. Yet the Office of the Auditor General is there. If the president truly wanted to demonstrate that he means well for this country, the IEBC bill was presented along the finance bill and the appropriations bill. If he chose to prioritize the appropriations bill and left the IEBC, then the message is that he does not consider it as an urgent issue, which in my view is a mistake. So the president has institutions, independent commissions, established under the Constitution and the law to do whatever he wants Kenyans to do. But first and foremost, demonstrate that he has implemented every recommendation in the NADCO report to warrant establishment of another national multi-sectoral forum.
Eric, just 2 seconds for your closing remarks, because
perhaps it's time now to go back and interrogate the Constitution of Kenya 2010 and see whether or not we need a referendum of sorts to consider whether Kenya needs to be in 47 boroughs called counties, or we reduce, whether Kenya needs women reps and senators all together.
It's been 10 years, we should have reviewed it by now. Alex?
Gen Z movement.
Just 2 seconds, yes.
Gen Z's movement is a movement that is long-term. Like the Mau Mau will cause changes, like the 1980s will cause changes, and people that are in government must understand that. The only difference with this is that they are claiming they are leaderless, they are all this, because there's a change that they will cause, but then they need to be organized themselves so that they have a leadership that can carry to the next level. Otherwise, it will be hijacked, like the Mau Mau fight was hijacked, like every other thing that have been hijacked in this country.
All right.
I hope that they can actually be able to come together. But this country has changed. There's a shift that has happened.
There's a shift that has happened. 2 steps forward, to what direction? Could be forward, could be backward, could be sideways. Food for thought, Kenyans. Thank you very much for being part of this conversation. Alex Mwathi, a political analyst on the table. Suba Churchill, the Executive Director, Kenya National Civil Society Center, for creating time. Also with us, I want to appreciate Eric Okeo, who is a security expert and also a political analyst. And for KTN News, for allowing us this platform. Thank you very much. My name is Anki Doris Sombat. Until tomorrow, I always say this, what Saitoti said, that a time will come that this country will be more important than any particular individual. Have a good night.